Hello, and welcome to another look with Christian King. Today I'm going to be doing my UFC on Fox 30, Alvarez versus Poirier 2 preview show. I'm very excited about this card. I'm going to give you a couple quick notes before I get started. This is kind of the disclaimer I always use. I have a full-time job. Unfortunately, at this time in my life, I'm not able to put as much into this as I would like to, so I am not able to do lots of film study. I listened to an interview with Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez each separately earlier to kind of see how they looked, what they seemed like. That doesn't tell you that much, though, because fighters never disclose injuries the week of the fight. And then I went back and watched their first fight one more time. If I had more time, I would have gone back and watched both their fights versus Justin. I have seen both of their fights against Justin Gaethje several times, and I've now watched their first meeting, Alvarez versus Poirier 1 at UFC 211 several times, and I watched it, literally turned it off about 10 minutes ago. So I'm coming here with a fresh perspective. There's one other new thing I'm going to be looking to try out. Probably won't use it today, but in the future, I need the ability to be able to pause when I'm recording. So what I'm going to do if I need to pause on a recording in the future is I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to take a quick break. And for you, there won't be any break. You might hear a click and then another click, and that's just me clicking the pause recording button on my computer. And then I'll just say, and welcome back, and I'll keep going. So there won't really be any pause to y'all, but to me, that would be a huge help, especially when I'm getting to some of these longer shows. So, without further ado, speaking of the longer shows, I looked all through the beginning of this card, the preliminary card on Fox at 6 p.m. and the Fight Pass card that starts at 4. Frankly, there's a lot of filler in there. And I feel like with the fact that I don't have time to do film study, I am just going to make this a main card preview. I hope that's okay with everyone. I'm sure you can find good odds. Go to bestfightodds.com if you want odds on any of the earlier fights. But I just don't think there's a lot of point in me going through, like 11 other fights. And for each of them, it's at least 10. Yeah, 10 other fights or 9 other fights, and just simply saying, oh, well, I don't know too much about this one. I didn't watch any film on this one, or I'm not that familiar with this guy. That doesn't really help me. It just wastes my time. And then by the time I get to the main card, I've already been recording for a while, and I'll have less passion to put into it. So we're going to jump straight into the main card. On the preliminary card, I will do this for you. Look for any highlights. So going up, Devin Powell is back. If you recognize Devin Powell's name, it's very likely from his recent story. He had a ruptured testicle in training, doing grappling, believe it or not. Got caught with a knee, I think, like in an awkward guard pass maybe, had a ruptured testicle, so that's interesting, and apparently he's coming back. That's great. Nina Ansaroff's been doing well. She's taken on Randa Marcos. Let's see, what else we got? John McDessie versus Ross Pearson. That's a good veterans fight, headlining that Fight Pass preliminary card, and then getting up onto the preliminary card on Fox. Let's see, Cajun Johnson's taking on Islam Makhachev. I think Islam Makhachev will win that fight by decision pretty easily, just out-grapple the Canadian. Cajun Johnson, interesting, he's been very outspoken against a lot of the UFC's practices, and frankly, he's putting his neck out there for the little guys, because it's not like the UFC would shut down without Cajun Johnson, so good for him for speaking his mind, but I don't think it's going to help him win this fight. And then we've got, really, that's about it. I mean, I'm sure there's some other great fights on these cards, but like I said, I just want to stick to the ones that I have the most to say about. So, and hopefully later on in the future, I'll have more time to devote to this, and I can do a little more studying and watch some good interviews, figure out where guys have been training, go back and watch a lot of their previous fights. At some point, I'd like to get to the point where if a guy's making his UFC debut, I can go through and, watch all of his regional fights, find them on YouTube and watch them all, make notes. I just don't have the time right now. So let's jump right into this main card. And then one other new thing I'm going to be doing today is when I make a pick, I make my picks on the spot. Like I said, I don't rehearse this. I'm just giving you my first take on these and looking at the odds for the first time. I haven't looked at any of these odds as usual, and I don't know who I'm going to pick necessarily yet. So if you hear any little scribbling, I'm going to write down simply my method of victory and the round, or just unanimous decision or split decision, whatever I think, if I think it's going to go the distance. But I'm just going to be making some quick notes of who I pick, so that way when I do my recap show, it's easier for me to remember the solid, confident picks I took. All right, so let's dive right into this. Opening up the main card on Big Fox at 8 p.m. as opposed to Fox Sports. Opening up the main card on Big Fox at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Notice I remembered the Eastern Time part. If you listen to my Darren Elkins, Alexander Volkanovski preview, I was reading West Pacific Time. So, yeah, Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Olivier Aubin-Mercier from Canada, of course, if you can't tell by that name, versus another Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great Hernandez. At some point, even though those guys are 2 weight classes apart, they're going to have to arm wrestle or something over that nickname. We got to figure out who's Alexander the Great. There can't be 2 of them. All right, so OAM, we'll call him OAM, taking on Alex Hernandez. Well, we've only seen Alexander Hernandez in the UFC once, and he knocked out Beneil Dariush in, I think, like less than a minute. So I don't know that much about him. He looks very big and very strong. I'm very impressed that he makes lightweight. Not quite sure how he does. He looks huge. Yeah, he's quite the physical specimen. OAM has a lot more experience in the big show. He's coming off his first finish ever over Evan Dunham. And I think it was first round, some knees to the body, if I'm not mistaken. I think both guys are pretty young. Alexander Hernandez is 25. Wow, he's young. And OAM, what's he looking at? He's pushing 30. He's 29. So they're both young, both still probably working towards their primes. This is a hard one for me to really give a super solid pick on. In fact, I'm kind of almost likely to take a pass on picking this, but I'm not going to do this. I think that Alexander Hernandez is going to come out, and I think he's going to put OAM in some trouble early, but I think Mercier is going to use his octagon experience and be able to rally back, start some grappling exchanges. I think he's actually going to end up finishing this fight in the second round via rear naked choke. Now, like I said, this is not my most confident pick on the card, but I'm going to favor the more experienced fighter. And I'm not sure where Alexander Hernandez trains out, but I know OAM trains out of TriStar. I think he's got Viras Sahabi in his corner, who is just one of the best minds in the game. And I think if there's anyone who can overcome a very athletic, quick-starting prospect, I think that it can be him, and I think he can hand Hernandez his first UFC defeat. So let me just jot that down really quick. Got OAM via RNC round 2. Okay. All right, let's look at the odds. Now that I've already inked my pick, I can't take it back. All right. Okay. OAM is the favorite at minus 140. You can get him as low as minus 134. And Hernandez is as high as plus 106. So barely an underdog in OAM, a decent little favorite. But yeah, that's close odds. I would maybe see them wider for OAM, but I'm also picking him. So we're going to see. We'll see how that one plays out. But that's my pick, OAM by rear naked choke round 2 after weathering some early adversity. Okay. Next up, we have Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the former champion, Joanna not champion. I might have stolen that from someone, so don't give me credit for that. But Joanna not champion, taking Chael Sonnen. That's Chael Sonnen's thing. Okay, so according to Chael Sonnen, she's Joanna not champion now, which I think is very funny. But Joanna Jędrzejczyk taking on Tecia Torres. So, what do I think about this fight? Well, there's a big X factor in this fight. Is Joanna coming back too soon? Can she handle another weight cut after a brutal loss to Rose? That was a war. Her face was busted up. But I think what favors her is while the weight cut may be hard, I do think she seems to be have really done a better job with it in her most recent fight. Despite the loss, she looked way healthier on fight week. And Tecia is not a power puncher. So that kind of, Rose can crack. The champ, Rose Namajunas, she can crack. She hits hard. Joanna's fought some other girls who can hit pretty hard. Valerie Letourneau definitely hits pretty hard. Jessica Andrade, although she didn't have much success in that fight, hits hard. Tisha Torres is not, I don't even know if she has a knockout on her record. I think she only has 1 or 2 finishes, and they're by submission. So I think that, both these girls are coming off a tough loss. Joanna's coming off that tough loss where she got the rematch to try and get her belt back, and she lost to Rose again. And Torres is coming off what was probably a pretty frustrating defeat against Jessica Andrade, where she had an excellent first round, really looked like she had the blueprint, but then just couldn't keep it up, just couldn't keep Jessica Andrade off of her, which is definitely nothing to be ashamed of. Andrade is a beast, but I think that Tisha, I think they both want to win here big, but my issue with this fight for Tisha is just that I don't think she has the power or the size to trouble Joanna. So think about it this way. What's Tisha Torres' path to victory? Okay, well, she isn't going to be able to take down Joanna and out-grapple her. Well, why? Why do we know that? Well, we know that because Jessica Andrade couldn't take down Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And I'm not trying to do some MMA math where I'm going to say, oh, Jessica Andrade took down Tisha and she couldn't take down Joanna, so therefore Tisha can't take down Joanna. But sometimes MMA math actually does work, and in this case, for me, it absolutely works. We've seen Joanna stuff takedowns from Claudia Gadelha and Jessica Andrade. She's very hard to take down, even harder to hold down if you do get her hips to the ground for half a second. And Tisha's not even known as a takedown artist. So that path to victory, in my opinion, is out the window. So what is Tisha going to do then? Well, then she has to strike with Joanna. Okay. So she has kind of a fleet of foot. She has a karate background. She kind of has that fleet of foot outside striking style. I just don't think Joanna's the right girl to play that game against. Joanna has great front kicks, great leg kicks, really nice jab, a really good 1-2. She just has some good clean punches for that range. And I don't think that Tisha's not Mike Tyson. She's not just going to bob and weave into the pocket and launch crazy huge power hooks and knock Joanna out. I don't see that happening. So I think that this fight, first off, I would definitely think this fight's going to go to a decision, because Tisha is not a fighter who gets flustered and panics and makes bad decisions. If she is getting lit up a little on the feet, she's still going to stay in there, no problem. I don't think she's going to get finished, but I definitely don't think she has the ability to finish Joanna. And I just think Joanna's jabs and leg kicks, using that teep kick right up the middle to push Tisha back if she tries to come in on her. I think Joanna's got this one, and I think it'll be a decision. And I feel like Joanna could really use a finish here if she wants to get right back in that title picture, but I don't think she's going to be able to get a finish against Tisha. Tisha's just too damn tough to finish. So I've got Joanna winning this one by unanimous decision, and in my opinion, that is not going to be enough to get anyone super excited about her going back in against Rose a third time. I think they're going to end up matching Rose up with Jessica Andrade, and Jessica Andrade might be the one to beat Rose. I'm not sure. I'll come to that decision when I preview that fight card, whatever it may be. I think Joanna's best bet here is to get a decision win. Well, a finish would be best, but I think she'll get a unanimous decision win. And then I think she should seriously consider moving up to 125. And here's why. You might say, oh, well, coming off a win, why wouldn't she stick around? I think it's time for her to move on and move up a weight class and be able to fight more frequently, not have the brutal weight cut, not be as, it makes you fragile when you're cutting all that weight. You're more likely to get injured. I just think it'd be a good idea for her to move up. And I think that it actually moving up off a win is perfect, because then she can kind of help to start to push those losses to Rose to the back of everyone's mind and give them a fresh memory of her winning a good fight, and then move up as someone who's coming off a win, not as a loss. And I think that might be easier for her ego too. I'm not saying she has ego issues. I don't know her, but she handled the second loss to Rose very interestingly. She still refers to herself as the queen, still sees herself as the champ. I thought she very clearly lost that fight 3 rounds to 2. So I feel like maybe she's having a little trouble accepting defeat after having so much success. I could be totally wrong. I could be misreading it. I don't know her personally, but I think it would be easier for her mentally to move up off of a win. That's my opinion. Okay, so what do we have next? We have Jose Aldo, the former 145-pound champion, taking on Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens' name was recently in the headlines, and I'm not talking about Who the Is That Guy by Conor McGregor. That was a while ago, but that is who that guy is. I'm talking about he was supposed to step up on short notice to take on Brian Ortega at UFC 226 a few weeks ago, and Brian Ortega wanted nothing to do with it, and I don't blame him one bit. That was probably the smart career move. Don't take a last-minute fight. Don't worry about an interim title. Stay ready for your real title fight, but Jeremy Stephens definitely earned himself some major fan support by being that motivated to, I mean, he already has a big fight coming up, and he was willing to forget all of that, interim title or not, and come fight Brian Ortega on like I think 3 or 4 days notice. So the fans love Jeremy Stephens. This dude's been with the UFC forever. He's got a really good rapport with Dana White. He always brings it. He's a really fun guy. And, of course, we all know Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo is the man. Jose Aldo, and we'll get to another one of my wife's favorite fighters when we get to the main event. My wife is in love with Jose Aldo. She calls him Little Jose, and she says he's the cutest thing in the world. So, I don't know. I don't really look anything like Jose Aldo, so I wonder if that should concern me. But she seems to love me a lot, so I'll stick with that. But yeah, Jose Aldo, my wife will be happy to know I am picking Jose Aldo to win this fight. I think he will win this fight by decision. Jeremy Stephens has been on a tear as of late, an absolute tear. He's very violent finisher when he gets that opportunity. And it's kind of funny because he has this reputation as a finisher, and he actually hadn't had a finish in a little while until this year. He took out Doo-Ho Choi, the Korean Superboy, and then he took out Josh Emmett from Team Alpha Male a couple months back. And there was some slightly really illegal strikes thrown in that finish, but once he gets going, he can't stop. He's like a wind-up toy once he sees that finish. So the ref needs to keep an eye on Jeremy Stephens when he gets someone in trouble, because he completely forgets about the rule book whenever he gets a fighter in trouble. And I don't think it's because he's trying to be a dirty fighter. I think he literally just stops thinking once he smells blood. He's that much of a savage. That's my take on Jeremy Stephens. So why am I picking him to lose this fight? Well, I seem to be giving him a lot of praise. Obviously, I think the guy is incredibly talented. He's a hard worker, but Jose Aldo is that elite level of fighter. And he is coming off the Holloway wars. He lost. The second one was less of a war and more of him getting beat. But the first fight was a war. He lost both of them by pretty bad finish. But I still think that he's got it in him. And part of what I'm basing that off of is the fact that when he lost to Conor McGregor by knockout in 13 seconds, he came back and he made Frankie Edgar lay a goose egg, if that's the correct saying. He wiped Frankie Edgar out on the scorecards. Frankie Edgar got nothing going in that fight, and that was only about 6 months later. He's had some decent time off since then. Jose Aldo is only 31 still, and he has had over 7 months off, if I'm not mistaken. He hasn't fought since the 2nd of December last year, so I think he's coming in recovered. I think that he'll be ready to go. And Jeremy Stephens is a dangerous finisher, but Jose Aldo has such good footwork and such a good sense of range. I don't think that Jeremy Stephens is really going to be able to get much of a glove on him. And that might be a little bit too bold of a prediction on my part, but all I can think about is how good of a job Jose Aldo did neutralizing Frankie Edgar. And I feel like Jeremy Stephens, he does seem to improve a lot. He's working with Alliance, if I'm not mistaken. He seems to do very well. He seems to do his best work with that team. I think Eric Del Fiero is the head coach there, if I'm not mistaken. A really well-known guy. I know his first name's Eric. I just might be butchering the last name a little bit, but big fan of that camp. Obviously, that's Dominic Cruz's team. Jeremy Stephens. It's not that I don't think that he's capable of winning this fight. It's just that one man has to win and one man has to lose. And if I have to pick a winner here, I'm forced to take Jose Aldo. I can't pick against him against anyone really other than Max Holloway and Conor. I mean, maybe there's some other people out there who would trouble him, but I would pick Jose Aldo to beat Brian Ortega. Most likely, I'd have to think about it, but I'm pretty sure I would. I just think Jose Aldo. I also think that a 3-round fight might do Jose Aldo some service if he really controls his pace, I feel like, sometimes he gets stressed out with those 5-round fights. The only 5-round fight I've ever seen him just push hard through the entire fight was the second Chad Mendes fight. But, that was also a few years ago. And Chad Mendes really didn't give him much of a choice. He was either going to lose that fight or he was going to push through. And he had his entire country behind him. The arena was on their feet cheering for him. That's got to be motivating. So I feel like he really willed himself through that fight. But I think ideally for him, 5 rounds isn't his favorite thing to do, especially after that weight cut. So I think that 3-round fight, if he game plans around that, I think he'll be able to effectively neutralize Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens may have put a pretty good hurting on Gilbert Melendez with those low calf kicks, but no one leg kicks like Jose Aldo. And I think that if he starts working the legs a little bit on Stephens, uses the jab to keep him on the outside, just don't really let him get his power punching going. That's what I'm seeing happening in this fight. I'm seeing it. Kind of being maybe, I don't think this is going to be a war is what I'm getting at. I think Jose Aldo is just going to use his veteran savvy and his fight IQ to win this fight. And I think for people like me and you, it will be an amazing fight. And but I don't think it will be a war that's going to win fight of the year. And that's why I think Jose Aldo will win it, because it's not going to be some crazy blood and guts war. I think he's going to just be the smarter man inside that cage that night. So I'm picking him to win by unanimous decision. I would probably say 30-27. And same for JJ, if I didn't specify that. When I say unanimous decision for both of these fighters, I'm seeing 2 clean sweeps in a row. That's how I see it. Okay, now we get to the main event. This is a good one, y'all. Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier 2. Man. And I still don't know who I'm picking. I'm gonna have to talk through this one out loud a little bit. I'm pretty sure I know, but we'll see. We'll see what conclusion I come to. Man, I cannot wait for this fight. Dustin Poirier. People might think he's in his early 30s or something. He's only 29. I think he might even been a little bit younger than Conor when they fought. Or at least he was like the same age as Conor, because they were kind of trying to make it sound like, oh, here's the veteran versus the newcomer. They're both the same age. Just Poirier's been with the Zuffa brand under WEC, and then the UFC when they absorbed the WEC. He's been with them forever, so he is a veteran of the game in that sense, but he's still a young guy. Eddie Alvarez, I'm pretty sure, is in his, he's 34, which is no spring chicken for a lightweight. But I don't think age determines who wins a fight, so let's get away from that conversation a little bit. Wow, I just realized I forgot to give odds for the other 2 fights. You know what? I'm going to go back and do that. Not super professional on my part, but bear with me. Let's just go back very quickly and look at that. Joanna Jędrzejczyk is a big favorite over Tecia Torres, -2. You can find her as low as -253, and then you can find Tecia Torres as high as +230. It's a pretty wide gap, but sounds about like what I'm saying. And then we've got Jose Aldo as low as -124 versus Jeremy Stephens as high as +100. Or maybe I said the high and low part backwards, but yeah, so okay, decent odds there. Let's go back to this main event. So I think that what's really going to determine this fight is what Dustin Poirier does when he lands a good punch. And let me elaborate. Dustin Poirier, I picked Dustin Poirier to lose against Justin Gaethje. The reason I picked that was because of his first fight against Eddie. What I saw in that first fight is that no matter how much you coach Dustin Poirier, and no matter how much he says he's changed his game and he's matured, when the dude sees someone hurt, he tries to finish them and he goes crazy. He went absolutely ballistic trying to get Eddie Alvarez out of there in the first fight, and looked for a second there like he completely punched himself out, and then started getting hurt by Eddie's counters, even though Eddie was just swinging wildly because he was just punching too much to even worry about defense. But Dustin Poirier against Justin Gaethje, he showed composure. Yes, that fight was a war, but you don't have a choice when you fight Justin Gaethje. You have to fight a war to beat Justin Gaethje, but he fought an intelligent war. He was out there with recon, and we want to keep going with that analogy. He was out there with recon. He had satellites in the sky. He was paying attention to what was going on. He wasn't just doing the Braveheart battle cry and running in there like a madman. And I think if he continues to develop on that maturity, I really think that he can win this fight. I think that if Dustin Poirier had stayed calm during that first fight against Eddie, he could have finished him by the end of that second round without any of the controversy with the illegal knee, because he would have never ended up down in that position if he had just stayed calm and patiently waited for the finish to materialize instead of forcing the issue. Eddie Alvarez, now, I'm not blaming him. I mean, maybe in his mind he was thinking, wow, Eddie's a hard guy to hurt, and if I let Eddie back in this fight, I might not be able to hurt him again. He recovers fast. Sure, but look how it ended up. It didn't end up good for him. He ended up with his first, apparently his first seriously diagnosed concussion, and a really bad cut to the side of his left eye, and a no contest, which means that he didn't even get his win money for a fight that he could have won if he'd stayed calm. I think that was a big learning experience for him. I also think, though, that there's a good chance Eddie's going to look a lot better coming into this fight. Eddie was coming off of, when the first time they fought, Eddie Alvarez was coming off of I'll call it what it is, a humiliating loss to Conor McGregor. He said that when he said, I'm going to beat Conor McGregor. He has nothing for me. I'm going to show everyone that Santa Claus isn't real. And he got walloped by McGregor. He didn't make one good decision in that fight. He didn't have one good second in that fight. He didn't get one takedown. He didn't land one hard punch. He just got mollywopped. And that was, I'm sure, humiliating. That was the biggest fight of his life. And he went out there as champion, and he walked out not as champion. I'm sure that was terrible for him. So I'm not surprised upon rewatching the fight at this point about 30 minutes ago, rewatching his first fight against Dustin Poirier, that he looked way better. Even though the second round is the round he got hurt in, he looked much more relaxed going out in the second round. I think he just needed to get one round of cage time in to just regain that confidence that McGregor took from him, or that moment took from him, if you don't want to give McGregor the credit. So upon watching that fight again, Dustin Poirier looked good throughout the whole fight until he freaked out and tried to rush the finish. And Eddie Alvarez looked good before he got hurt. And then they ended up just in a brawl for a little bit there. But Eddie did not look very good in that first round. He just looked really stiff, and he looked slower than usual. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he's definitely not that slow. That first round made him look very slow and stiff, which is not at all who Eddie Alvarez is. So that first fight, Dustin looked really good, and he was really landing some sharp jabs. He had a really nice jab in that fight, and he had a really good straight left that he was throwing right down the center. That was landing clean and was hurting Eddie. He also threw a couple good leg kicks, a really nice body kick or two. He just seemed very confident and seemed to be mixing it up. Despite Eddie looking better in his next fight against Gaethje, which he won in the third round, I still think that that Dustin is the better fighter if they're at a kickboxing range, like an outside fight. So let's talk about what both fighters need to do to win this fight. Okay. I'll do Dustin first because I think I've already made it pretty clear. To win this fight, Dustin Poirier needs to stay calm and stay patient and be willing to win a decision if that's what it takes. And that's what I felt like he was willing to do against Justin Gaethje. Both these guys are susceptible to leg kicks, it seems like, based on the Gaethje fights, but I don't see either one of these guys coming out just looking to throw hard leg kicks like Gaethje does. So I'm not really going to factor that in too much. I think that Dustin, to win this fight, I think Dustin just needs to stay calm and keep the fight at a good kickboxing range. Lots of jabs, lots of straight punches, a few leg kicks, mix it up with some good body kicks. And I think Dustin can win this fight. But if Dustin hurts Eddie and then goes crazy and it becomes a dogfight, I never pick against Eddie Alvarez in a dogfight. All right, so now let's get to Eddie Alvarez and his keys to winning this fight. So, first off, if I do pick Dustin Poirier, it's a very heartfelt pick because I will most likely be sleeping on the couch for picking against my wife's favorite fighter, Eddie Alvarez. She loves Eddie. Once again, I'm not part Puerto Rican, and I'm also not bald, but she thinks Eddie Alvarez is the cutest fighter on the roster, so maybe I need to figure out how to become a bald Puerto Rican guy. But in the meantime, we'll just talk about this fight. All right, so Eddie Alvarez, to win this fight, what does he need to do? Okay, well, the first thing I think he needs to do is he needs to establish his wrestling and his takedown as an actual threat. In the first round of their first fight, a lot of firsts here, but first round of their first fight, Eddie Alvarez kind of half-heartedly tried to just threaten the takedown, but it wasn't at all, there was no danger behind it. You could tell Poirier wasn't even entering his mind. He was like, okay, dude, like, you can barely pretend to change levels. Like, I'm not worried about that. You don't look like you're at all serious about hitting a takedown. If I wanted Eddie Alvarez to win this fight, and we should say both these guys come from incredible camps and incredible coaches, so I don't think either one of these guys have a huge advantage in strategy. I would say maybe Eddie Alvarez, being under Mark Henry, would have the slight advantage in strategy. And if they maybe they're thinking the same thing as me, but if they aren't, then that probably means they're right and I'm wrong, because they're the fight geniuses and I'm just the guy with the microphone. But what I will say is that I think what I'd like to see, if I'm rooting for Eddie Alvarez, what I would like to see is for him, what maybe the first thing he does, jab, shoot a double leg. Nothing wrong with that. It's a 5-round fight. You've got plenty of time to give the fans a good show if you're worried about that, which at this level, I think these guys are worried about winning, not pleasing the fans. But if you're Eddie Alvarez needs to establish the takedown as a real threat. Even if maybe he shoots a takedown early and doesn't get it, if he makes Dustin actually work to defend it, then it's a threat. If you just hint at a level change, it's not a threat. He needs to make that part of Dustin Poirier's mind space. Is this guy going to shoot for a takedown? That's what Eddie needs to do, in my opinion. He needs to go out there and he needs to immediately establish that he is willing to wrestle to win this fight, and at least get that in Dustin's mind. What's the other thing that Eddie needs to do? He needs to do a lot more of what he was doing against Gaethje. Now, obviously, Poirier and Gaethje are very different fighters, but against Gaethje, Eddie was throwing to the body. He was mixing it up. He was using kind of some of those put your hands out in front of you and move them around a little bit, kind of mirror the hand movements of the other fighter. It was almost what McGregor did to him. I don't think I was the only one who picked up on that. I'm pretty sure I've heard other people say that, but I picked up on that right away. I was like, wow, it looks like he stole a few of McGregor's tricks, and now he's using them in this fight. Now, granted, he was coming off of that no contest against Poirier. He hadn't, at that point, it had been over a year since he had fought McGregor, but, sometimes you learn lessons a little bit after the fact, I guess. But it looked to me like he was almost using some of those same little hand traps that McGregor had used against him, and he was working the body really well. I also wouldn't mind seeing him throwing a few leg kicks. Dustin Poirier did that in their first fight. I think both guys are a little susceptible to getting kicked in the leg, but I think that Eddie's legs are they're just built better. He's got thicker legs, thicker calves. I think that he can put a little more power. He's a very, very built guy. I think he can put a good amount of power in some leg kicks there, and I also think that it seems to me like, even though both of them got their leg pretty brutalized against Gaethje, I feel like Eddie can take those leg kicks a little bit more just because he's such a dog, and I just feel like he can just completely zone out the pain. I felt like in between every round, you could see Poirier kind of trying to stretch out his leg, grimacing, limping a little bit. I feel like Eddie, maybe he's just built a little tougher, and that's no disrespect against Dustin Poirier, of course, but I think that if one of them was going to feel the effects of a few leg kicks more than the other, I would think that Poirier might feel those effects a little more. So I'd like to see Eddie working a few leg kicks, but the main thing I think is he just needs to threaten his wrestling, because I feel like if he threatens that takedown, then he can open up a lot of other things. I think he can, he was throwing a nice he's throwing some nice uppercuts against Gaethje. He also had that nice knee that finished it, and he was throwing kind of some like shovel, I think maybe you'd call it like a shovel punch, but kind of like almost an uppercut between an uppercut and a hook to the body against Gaethje. And all of that is good stuff if you establish the takedown as a threat, and then you feint the takedown and use some of those strikes. I feel like that's a good path to victory. Now, like I've said in the past, I'm not a coach of professional fighters by any means, so I'm just spitballing a little bit here. But that's what I feel like Eddie needs to do, and I feel like it comes down to that one thing. I feel like he needs to open up the wrestling as a real threat. So I'm going to go ahead and get to the point here and try and make a pick. And, I'd love to pick Eddie Alvarez here. I really would. And do I think Eddie Alvarez has a great shot of winning this fight? I absolutely do. But I'm going to have to pick Dustin Poirier here. And I think he's going to get the finish. I do. Now, it's a little bit of a risky pick. I'm not 1,000% confident in this. You never can be with a fight pick, and technically you can never be over 100% positive about anything. But I'm going to go with Dustin Poirier, and I'm going to take him. I'm going to take him winning this fight by third round knockout or TKO. I'm going to say that Dustin Poirier is going to take this one by TKO in the third round. And I'll give you a little bit of a reason why I'm picking that, and then I'll get off here. So what's making me say third round is that I think that both of these guys have improved some since their first meeting, but they're both pretty established fighters. So, you can't get twice as good in the span of a year or two when you're already that good. That's the type of improvements you make at the beginning of your career. And I think that if one of them has improved a little more, though, I think it's Dustin Poirier. And I think Dustin Poirier really showed maturity against Justin Gaethje. So the way I'm looking at this is my logic behind this pick. I'm imagining that the fight looks pretty similar. My logic behind this pick is that the fight looks pretty similar to their first fight, but without Dustin Poirier freaking out and trying to get the finish too quick, and without Eddie Alvarez having a really bad first round. So I'm picturing they come out, they have a pretty even first round, but Poirier starts to get some good jabs going, starts to get some setups, and then the second round, Dustin starts landing some good straight lefts and starts hurting him. And I think he stays calm. I think his coaches have to plead with him. They say, please, Dustin, please calm down. Stop going for the finish. Calm down. Patience, patience. But I think that he will listen to them. And I think that he's starting to believe in that more himself. So it's easy for him to listen to them because he agrees with them, even if it's hard for him to fight off his instincts to rush in for a finish. And I think that Eddie will get out of that round, but he won't, a minute's not a lot of time to recover. And then I think Dustin Poirier will go right back to work in the third round, keep landing the jab, keep landing the straight lefts. And then I think it will become clear that Eddie is hurt to the point where Dustin can go in for the kill, and I think once he does, that'll be it. So I'm not 1,000% confident in that pick, and I hope that Eddie comes out and tries to establish the wrestling as a threat right away, but even factoring that in, I'm still not sure if that'll be enough to take the win. So yeah, I'm going by Dustin Poirier, just like I said right there, taking him by TKO/KO in the third round. But I think it'll be an excellent, excellent fight. And if I'm wrong, I will not be disappointed, because if I'm wrong and Eddie wins, then that probably means it got crazy. And every MMA fan loves a little crazy, that's for sure. All right, so that's it. Main card only. I hope that was okay with everyone. I'm going to continue to kind of try and stick to the fights that I know more about, like I said, and then hopefully one day I'll have some more time to put into this and can get into the nitty gritty of the undercard a little bit more. So Nick Newell's fighting tomorrow night. I'll be watching that. I might come on and talk about that a little bit afterwards. I'll definitely be on. I'm planning on coming on right after events from now on, if possible. In which case, at about 10 or 10:30 p.m. Eastern time, I'll come on and do a recap of this main card. Then next Sunday or Monday, I'll have my preview show out for UFC 227. It's a busy couple weeks for me. Very excited about all of it. I absolutely love this sport. I love talking about this sport. So look for me to come on at some point this week. If any changes happen to the card, I'll try and get on. Since I'm not out of town this time, I'll try and get on and talk about any late notice replacements or any weight cutting craziness that happens. Hopefully none of it. And I might come on and talk about Nick Newell's fight if there's any significance there. But in the meantime, just remember, at 8 p.m. Eastern time, tune into Fox to watch this main card, and make sure you're in your seat and ready to enjoy the madness when Eddie Alvarez takes on Dustin Poirier for the second time. All right, I'm out.